What if all the rich, diverse journeys of our souls are how God explores the universe as us? And what if we awaken to that? What then? Come join us as we open the door to all the adventures of being human in these times on this beautiful planet we call home. Welcome to the show today. And we're doing something a little different. I'm going to be the subject of an interview. And Richard, my husband of many years, is going to be the interviewer.
All right. Well, this is an interesting opportunity. Well, let me ask you some deeper questions and see what kind of responses you have to them.
Right. This is unrehearsed. So,
All right. So let me ask you, who do you believe that you are?
well, that's a good question, and I would say most of the time, to be honest, I believe I'm, this particular personality, Susan Pitcairn, whatever I am, this body, this kind of persona that I am in the world. And then sometimes more when have my eyes closed and kind of by myself, and I'll kind of go, who am I really? And what comes up is kind of an inner smile, kind of like this. And it's just like, this whole thing feels like a joke. And it seems like who I am really is just some kind of a being. It's sort of formless, but it seems connected with God. I'm not saying I'm God of the universe, of, everything that is, but I feel, I hope not, for God's sake. But no, let's not do that. So, but it feels like it's part and parcel of that consciousness, and that I'm one of, just say, zillions and zillions of sort of expressions or fractals of God in action and embodied in a form. And I do believe that, based really as much as anything on all the NDEs and stuff I've heard about, and, the reports of all that kind of thing, that I will take on another form or leave my body or become formless light, or I don't really know, but I'm not going to look like this forever. I mean, I haven't even looked like this forever in my life. I mean, it's just how I look today.
So you're saying there's always change going on.
Yes, there is. At the level of form, what's really made the most sense to me of any of the spiritual wisdom I think I've ever studied has been when Eckhart Tolle said, there's really just two things going on. There's form, and then there's what's formless. And I think that totally makes sense. I mean, it simplifies it. The formless is pretty much just pure awareness, beingness. There's really no name for that. And form is everything else. And that includes not only what we can see, smell, taste, feel, touch, and sense, even in terms of energies in our body or sensations or pains or pleasures. It's even thoughts. Thoughts are forms too, right?
But why would you choose form?
Why would I choose form? Wow. To have fun, to enjoy things. Maybe it's kind of boring to just sit out there in the void. I don't know. I can't remember distinctly doing that. But I can tell you that every day in this life, there are ways in which I choose form over the formless, for sure. I find things to do. I enjoy life. I like all the form and color, and I like all the food, and I like all the friends, and I like nature and all those kinds of things. And so it just seems to come with the territory. Now, how would I be hanging out in the void if I really were to encounter that? I don't know. People say that it's kind of a timeless state. It's like all time and all space is in the here now. And in that situation, I guess you wouldn't really have a sense of time passing in which you could get bored, right? Because it would be,
There wouldn't be any time.
wouldn't be time as we know it. To have time, you have to have something happening. You have to have some kind of form, right, to mark it. If nothing else, a clock, recording it. But or just things changing, like yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and all those things, and all those projections through memory.
Yeah, you have to have a sense of change. Otherwise, it doesn't seem like there's time.
Right. It's really pretty timeless. So, but one thing I do see, happening in the world of time, I see myself getting older, and that's something that I I have to warn you, anyone that's younger looking at this, as unbelievable as it may seem, you may think I am a child, or I am a young adult, or I am a middle-aged person. I'm here to tell you that's going to change. And if your identity is that, it's not going to last forever. And so your identity is not any of that. But I do remember, when I was a child, kind of like, okay, I'm a child. They're the adults. It's just kind of the way things were. And it's, of course, intellectually we understand otherwise, but I mean, I still have that kind of like, I can't see myself as like 100-year-old, really decrepit kind of person. I'm
I
just,
can't either.
I don't want to go there. It's like, honestly, so unless 100 looks pretty good, man, feels pretty good, but getting closer there all the time.
Okay, well then let's say considering that context,
Hmm.
tell me about one of the most profound insights you've had in your life, one that has served you through these years.
Yeah. I studied spirituality from my early 20s. I studied yoga and different forms of meditation and read some books on spirituality. Krishnamurti was one of my favorite. I took the S seminars and all that kind of stuff. And as time went on, it got kind of complicated to me. My mind was working it over, like, which of these things is the closest to truth? And I do remember earlier in my life when I was reading the Bible and I saw this part about the greatest of these is love. I thought, that's it. That's it. Close the book. The rest of it doesn't really matter. That's kind of something I've come back to again and again. But it's not as simple as just saying love, or having this idea of love. There's kind of the practice of it. And the practice of it, to me, kind of goes back to that formless thing. One of the biggest insights I think I ever had was about 1986. I was reading a book called Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense. I was studying psychology and doing some counseling. And I was having the same problem with like, which of the 250 psychotherapies in this book, do I do? And this just kind of cut through all of that. And was just saying there's just a few very simple insights. And the first one is really to recognize your thought as just being thought, not being reality. So it's like being able to step back from thought, and maybe a simple phrase like, it's just a thought. That one's really important. And to recognize as part of that, there's different moods, there's different states of being or consciousness or vibes, if you will. And so when you're in a higher state of consciousness or a more loving state of consciousness, your thoughts are going to be more positive, like naturally. And when you're in a lower state of consciousness, they're going to be, like you're, all the way down to suicidal, kind of thoughts. It's going to be a whole huge range of thoughts. It's like on a scale. And so you can kind of tell where you're at by the kind of thoughts you're having and the kind of feelings you're having. But really, I think the secret to life is when you can remember to do so, and it's a practice you have to come back to again and again. I have to come back to again and again. It's just to step back from my beliefs that I'm engaged in at the present moment. Even if they seem kind of positive, they're still just thoughts. And so the ultimate truth is it's not nothingness in the sense of like some kind of empty void, like a boring place, but it's some sort of luminous peace, an experience. And it often, when I've lost touch with it, which I do all the time, the way to get back to it for me is just to feel my body and sense, especially my heart, my breath, and just try to feel the silence of silent energies and love as it kind of moves throughout my body and beyond, just maybe in the whole room is even, or the whole world ultimately is the most expansive state to be in. So the more formless kind of experience I can experience or have, the more it seems closest to truth. So even I would say, last night I was watching a movie with a friend called Astral City, It was about the afterlife, really. An interesting thing, and there were lots of things going on and lots of lessons for the characters to learn, and it was a beautifully made movie and so on. But I think even if I were in a realm like that, it was pretty exalted compared to how things are here on Earth. And there was kind of a hierarchy with different people in charge, and just kind of like it is on Earth. I would hope that I could apply the same understanding and insight that who I am is eternal. It's part of an eternal, formless spirit. There's nothing to judge about it or to judge about anyone else's same essence. And that that's what we really are. And so any kind of teachings or whatever that are in contradiction to that or that don't acknowledge that, it's a fundamental equality, really, of all beings, too. I mean, we may all the time be at different states of awareness of who we are, of course.
You said earlier, though, that the formless might be boring.
Yeah, I think maybe the best thing really is probably to learn how to live with, as they say, one foot in one world and one foot in the other, so that you can maintain that sense of being that essence, that formless essence, as you enjoy the ups and downs, the beauties and the hardships and all that in the world, and navigate it.
Hmm.
Don't you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're going to be in both, having experiences in a sense in both worlds, you have to somehow have it at the highest level, I would say.
Yeah, and there's still times, especially when I'm feeling physical pain, something's kind of intense, that I can sink down rapidly and think, oh, it's not worth it, to live here. It's just, or I see other people that are suffering, intense pains, level 9, 10 pain for most of the time for months on end, like neurological issues and stuff. It just, you start wondering, like, why is it that way?
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah, the other day you and I had a conversation, which was kind of interesting when we were looking at the nature of pain. And recently I had a kind of an injury to my knee, like a torn meniscus. And so it was pretty painful at times initially, level 9, 10. And it's hard to even like focus or meditate or try to visualize or do anything like that or anything sometimes other than scream for me, I'm kind of a screamer when it comes to that, as you know. But it seems like it really makes a difference. We were sitting in the ER room and there was one of these little things hooked up to my fingers that measures your oxygen level. And I thought, let me see if I can just increase my oxygen level by a few points. So the insight that I had in kind of the oxygen thing was applying it to pain. What you focus on increases. So if you focus on the energy of relaxation, then that increases. If you focus on the pain, maybe I'm trying to report it to my homeopath, or maybe I'm just wanting to complain because I'm looking for some sympathy or something, it gets worse. And so if I focus on just a pure energy, that sensation of pain can begin to transform into something more spacious. And it sort of dissolves, it lessens at the very least. And so that's a lesson that I have learned, but I think I'm learning more so recently about the nature of pain.
Good. What would you say is the source of your greatest happiness?
Well, sometimes, and again, I'm kind of identified with form, which I am much of the time. It's often other people. It can be you. It can, be people, just someone that's smiling at me, that makes me feel happy most of the time, unless I'm in a bad mood or something. And or when I smile at someone else and I see them smile back, that's actually one of the best sources of happiness for me. And that really, again, kind of comes down to love. And I think the other thing is just, which is really more primary, I would say, is sometimes when I'm sitting in meditation or in the middle of the night, I'm just kind of lying there alone. And I remember that there is an inherent unconditional joy or happiness. It has nothing to do with anything that's happening or not happening. And it's easier to sense it when nothing much is happening, because when stuff's happening, you're interacting with people, then you kind of tend to attribute your happiness, maybe if anything, to that interaction. But really, it's unconditional. It's not dependent upon anything happening. And so So the more that I become familiar in my life, and it's a lifelong process, with tapping into that and not getting caught up in, again, in all the traps of form. If only I had this, if only I would accomplish this, if only so and so would treat me this way, if only I'd feel this way, if only, if only da da da. The more that I can not do that and can just turn to that unconditional feeling of well-being, if you will. You could call it love. You could call it peace, joy. It's really none of those words. It's just a feeling, right? And I know that you know about this too. And in fact, anyone who's watching, I'm going to venture so far as to say, I think you know about it as well. We all just kind of forget about it, because it is so entrancing to be in the world of form.
Are you saying that that feeling then is always there? It's a question of being aware of it?
Something like that. I think it's always accessible to us. Sort of like you could say your body's, if your body's always there as long as you're alive. But much of the time you're not aware of it. Maybe you're asleep, or maybe you're thinking about something or working on bookkeeping or something, and you don't think about your body at all, but it is always there, right? So likewise, there is behind the mind, behind the body, behind all of that, there is, if you look for it, there's always a state of unconditional well-being. And I grant you, it's very hard to find sometimes in the middle of a lot of activity. But sometimes, once in a while, I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of stuff and running around. I just kind of like, oh, that, yeah. And then it just like makes everything that I'm doing, interacting with people or whatever, go so much better. So that would be really what I aspire to, is to just remind myself of that again and again. That's maybe partly why I wanted to do this video. So I can watch it, a good space right now, and just, a little reminder.
Well, let's say then words are limiting, but let's say what you're talking about, some people would refer to as a higher consciousness. How
Mhm.
do you, what's your approach to that, to feeling that, or to meditating so that you can experience that?
Well, the first thing would be to notice that it's not there, that I'm trying some technique, of meditation, or I'm thinking I should meditate, or I should feel better, or I should do the dishes, or I should plan for lunch or something. And so the first thing is to remember to look. And it's not the kind of thing that memory is designed to do. Memory is designed to accomplish particular tasks and to keep you safe and to judge and evaluate things and all that kind of stuff and be busy, so memory is not really, you can call it ego, is not really designed to annihilate itself. So I would say that sometimes I get motivated by not feeling that great, just knowing that I can feel better. Maybe I'm worrying about something or kind of wondering what to do about something. And so I get caught up in how are things going to turn out, if I do this or that, or in the world. And really, the most important thing, always, always, is your state of consciousness. And I don't mean like, are you able to read minds or, channel Archangel Michael or anything like that. I just mean, can you just be here, be happy, know who you are, be at peace? I think that's a challenge for all of us. And it's clearly a pretty big challenge on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what's happening, it's a challenge.
Yeah, because we get so caught up, and there's a lot of things we have to do just for the body to survive, like, fixing food and shelter and clothing, all these things, jobs and money, pay the bills,
Mhm.
and keep your appointments and all these things. So that's clearly part of the game. But, lately also, I mean, a long time ago, I heard the idea that maybe life is all just a drama. I mean, Shakespeare, he talked about that, but the Vedas talk about it. I mean, it's all just a play, the world's
Mhm.
stage. And that perspective can help also, to not take it too seriously. Like we have a mutual friend who says something like, I try not to take being human so personally, so um, it helps to not be attached to beliefs, not be attached to ideologies, to be open-minded and curious, all that.
Mhm.
But to
Yeah,
do those things, you have to know that who you are. You have to know first who you are is not your beliefs. It's not your religion. It's not your conditioning. It's none of that.
okay.
It's not your personality.
Mhm. Let's take it a little deeper.
Okay.
How do you understand God?
Yeah. Well, for a long time in my life, I didn't think about God hardly at all. It wasn't that I disbelieved that there was a God, but I didn't accept the biblical version of God as a big guy in the sky. I'm sorry. I had some fundamental understanding of God as being some power that was everywhere. I think from the time I came into this life, my grandmother said, one time my sisters and my mother was late picking us up, and they were crying, and I wasn't. She said, "Why weren't you?" And I said, "Well, God's everywhere, isn't he?" It's like, like, doesn't everybody know that? It's like, and I guess I used the word he because that's what everybody else was using. But right now, I hate to use the word it because it sounds so inanimate and kind of mechanical, but and she's not right either. I wish there was a better pronoun to describe what God is. And some things I've read about journeys of souls and afterlife and hypnosis and stuff, there are people beings at various advanced levels, whatever, of existence, but no one seemed to have really ever seen God. And I don't know if you can actually see God because that would make God a form, wouldn't it?
Mhm.
So I
If you
think,
mean by that seeing with our eyes,
yeah, see,
maybe see with awareness.
yeah, you can sense, I think you can sense something. I think it's really about sensing and feeling pure joy and a sense of a desire to express and create, perhaps, and just a
Mhm.
peacefulness. I think that's, for me, that's the nature of God. And now how God came to have the vast intelligence it took to create this universe or any other ones, I don't know. And I'm happy to not know. I don't think
Mhm.
that's my job. I think I'm more like you could say a child of God or a fractal of God, an expression. I'm not the whole ocean. This one here is not. I'm a drop in the ocean. And so I'll leave the currents and the flows and the greater movements of the ocean to something beyond the one drop that I am.
Mm. Okay,
I think that
good.
you got to be humble. You got to be willing to not know. That's what I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's turn it around. What do you consider to be one of your greatest strengths?
I don't know if that's turning it around, but I'd say my greatest strength is probably um, having some perspective on what we just talked about. And I'd say another real strength is curiosity and open-mindedness, creativity.
Can it become excessive?
Yeah. So okay. So any strength probably taken to excess, if that's all you rely upon, it's probably gets imbalanced. So like curiosity could kill the cat, right? So you could become, and I have become so curious about everything that's going on in the world today, and it's such a time of transition and darkenment and enlightenment and everything that's going on and uncertainty about changes happening in the world and global society, that I'm really curious about that. I want to follow it all. And so sometimes that takes me away from that formless anchor that we've talked about.
Mhm.
So maybe I should be more curious about how do I get back to that? you know, Curious about who I am again. And it's always a fresh new moment,
Mhm.
which is how it should be.
Yeah. What this kind of touches on the tendency that we all seem to have, which is to judge ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
and to judge others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you experience that coming up spontaneously.
Every day.
Yeah, so how do you deal with that continuing?
Yeah. The first thing I think is to notice that it doesn't make you feel good to do that,
Mm,
to judge
mhm,
anyone. And I would put, oneself and others in the same category, to judge anyone. And so if I'm feeling like a little guilty about something, like I could have done better, I should have been more patient, or maybe more loving, or I should have uh, done my share more, or not grab that extra cookie that you didn't notice they took, you know, things like that. If I find that coming up, the best response is always just, how would God deal with that? If you're
mm,
coming home in the afterlife, to the divine, and you're being embraced by the loving, formless arms of, of the light of God,
mhm,
how would that be received? And I think it would be like the prodigal son. It would be like with complete love and acceptance, like, you done your best. Um, it's not easy to be in this form and to do these things and to have these conditions. So it's like you're put into a movie, and the movie's kind of got a certain kind of choice of scripts on this planet anyway. So I think it helps, as far as judgment goes, to not judge yourself for judging. That's a great place to start. Sometimes it takes
mhm,
people a long time to even get that one. Not judge
mhm,
other people for judging. There you go too. If you see somebody that always seems judgmental or gossipy, or, oh, so and so is no good, and da, 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 da. Or I'll tell you politically. A few years ago, we were at a party, and I was noticing how people were joking around about Trump and saying how, and just kind of the liberal standard dismissing, he's a horrible person. It's just taken for granted. And there's a big judgment in there. And I just realized he's another soul. There's no need to judge this person. It was a real breakthrough. When somebody actually was at one of our gatherings recently said something like, if you haven't learned how to love Donald Trump, you haven't learned how to love. Yeah, and I guess I need to love some of the other ones now. I'm kind of starting to villainize a little bit too, that seem to be taking our world apart. So, and issuing mandates and control freaks and stuff. We all see it in different ways, but I mean, ultimately, if there's judgment, it has to be God judging God's self, right?
if
Would
that's
love,
all there is.
yeah,
Yeah.
if all there is really ultimately God and God's expressions, and the nature of God is love, the God force must love the act of creation. And this morning I was thinking about how we make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but there's no other way, for when I was working out a new song, it was coming to me, and I recorded it. And some places I thought, this just isn't quite right. This sounds a little bit discordant. The spacing's not right here. I'm just still learning about all this, but there's no other way to learn but than to make mistakes. And I used to teach art, and I would see that happen. A lot of people start out as kind of really pretty basic beginners, and get a lot of things what I would call wrong. But there's no other way to learn.
Mhm. Are you feeling that God is not judgmental?
Yes, definitely. I think that, let's say, the force of God, let's just call God unconditional love and well-being and happiness and joy. And how can that be judgmental?
Mhm. If you
You know,
didn't judge yourself, you'd feel more love, wouldn't you?
yes, if you didn't judge yourself or didn't judge others. Now, as an example of that, one of the things I judge the most is disorder and ugliness. Like, we walk down the street, and currently there's someone down the street who's let his house be just a construction mess for, I don't know, 3 years now. And I don't understand how it's allowed to be that way, but it just takes down the whole street. And it kind of affects my enjoyment of the walk, as you know. I'm kind of going, why did they do that? Why did they leave this thing out? Now they have a whole big pile of logs here, and now they have to take this wall down, and it's going to take them probably 3 months to do the next thing about it.
Considering what you're talking about,
Mhm.
has that changed over time? So you've become less judgmental?
I think that kind of thing right there is my number one challenge, actually. So I can see that's my practice I need to do. Now, can I look at that and sort of see that person as an aspect of God maybe. When I was teaching art, I was judgmental of like things like some modern art where it's kind of, it didn't take any talent to do that. It's just you're throwing paint at the canvas or something like that. And then I began to realize that everyone who sincerely wants to do art or to express themselves, and that you could say this is the God force in us wanting to create and explore, is in some way, without knowing it, looking for a way home, trying to understand the cosmos, trying to understand God. So in some paintings, it might be a sense of mystery, like, or distance or vastness, say, certain landscapes, like this one behind me, it's one of mine. The light on the rim there is sort of represents the light of God. That tree represents the solidity, the nobility, if you will, of the individual that we each are. As we stand there in the light and we look over the edge and there's all this around us. And so, who's to judge that tree standing on that ledge? It takes an act of bravery to incarnate. It takes an act of bravery to stand on the ledge of life, and that's all to be admired. And it's just the more that we see that, the more we can empathize with people that we might run into out in public who just seem like Joe Average, done this and that, and maybe looking a little sloppy and kind of gruff or something like that, or irritable or whatever. And increasingly, I do find it easier to just kind of, without judging myself for being incompassionate, to just feel compassion as I look at that person. And not that I'm better, because the compassion comes partly because of recognizing similar weaknesses in myself and accepting that. Yeah.
It helps to acknowledge to yourself that the same tendencies are there.
Yes. And the more that one is self-aware, the easier it is to not only love yourself, but to love others. So try to treat them as God would treat them. That alone would probably be the basis of one of the best life practices you could have. If your mind can ever remember to stay with one thing,
Yeah.
The mind wanders relentlessly.
The mind wanders.
Relentlessly, yeah. So that's the challenge of this game, it seems like, is that wandering mind.
Yeah.
And feelings seem like the key. The mind's very complex. Feelings are somewhat complex, but fairly simple. There's like extreme happy feelings and extremely negative feelings, but most of them are kind of in between. And they kind of are, again, if we can remember this, there are guideposts as to what quality and types of thoughts we're having right now that we're getting stuck in. So if you start seriously entertaining ideas like the world's going to hell, or I'm going to hell, or I'm getting, old and ugly and fat, or something like that, then you're going to get in a lower mood for sure. What
you're saying is that feelings are a better guide to how we're functioning mentally.
Yes, I think they're a God-given savior, a guidepost, to keep help us wander through this morass of thoughts. I mean, the average person has, what is it? They say, I don't know, 70, 80,000 thoughts a day or something like that.
I've lost count.
Yeah, a lot of them are similar, and you can find that out by if you just, take a few minutes and start writing down every thought as fast as you can. You can see how repetitive a lot of them are, and then later on you can look at them and kind of analyze. You see, what was the core thing there? I'm trying to get something done. I'm seeking approval, and I don't feel good enough with what I'm doing. I got to do more. I mean, whatever it is.
So it might be a really helpful thing to sort of develop giving attention to how you feel. As a guide, and then you can look more, well, what am I thinking about? Maybe that's the way to become more aware of the thoughts and what they're doing.
Well, when you asked me earlier what was the greatest insight I've had, that was it. Going back to that book, Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, that was one of the key things there. Like there's all these different practices and techniques in psychology and counseling that I had studied, and spirituality, and it was just getting more and more confusing. But that one instruction, if you will, was a key to the instruction manual. It's like, how some instruction manuals are pages after pages after pages, and you wish they just simplify it. Like, okay, give it to me in one page.
Not only are they page after page, but oftentimes they're unclear.
Right, they're unclear, and it's just like disclaimers and different things that you don't really need to know. Another benefit, I've noticed for following these guidelines for raising your consciousness in general is that it also increases the quality of your thoughts. And you don't necessarily, I don't think, have to practice a lot of stuff like, intentional gratitude or powerful intentions for your mind to manifest on the basis of what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not thinking negative stuff, I think it's just going to, and you're in a good space, I think it's going to really turn out well in your life, or better than otherwise, certainly than if you're thinking negative stuff. So it does affect the manifestation process, which people talk about a lot these days.
They do. And that's, common to a lot of different teachings, that are what we expect and what we think is what we'll experience. And it makes sense, because even if it was that we didn't somehow directly create it, still the way we see things tends to filter it out. And so if we have a negative attitude, we're going to see negative things.
It certainly affects the quality of your experience, but it also, I think, does actually make happier things happen in your world.
It's a very important thing to understand.
Yeah, and some of the people I know that you read, like Richard Dotz, emphasize a more effortless way of doing manifestations instead of trying to visualize everything precisely and being real controlling kind of about it. It seems like you got to leave some of it up to the universe.
We don't have with our minds the ability to see all the possibilities.
Yeah.
It's too limited.
Right. We're more like the drop instead of the ocean, but that's okay. Same substance in essence. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I think it's very helpful to hear it.
Yeah, thanks for helping me open up and share that. And I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to this to try that out. There's two maybe simple things there. One is it's just a thought. Whatever you're thinking, it's just a thought. It's not like necessarily the truth. It probably isn't the truth. It's just a belief. Be curious to go further. And the second thing is just, how are you feeling? And if you're feeling in a low state of mind, you're caught up in some thought that's not serving you and not serving the world, just step back from it. That's all there is. It's just stepping back from thoughts and letting feelings be your guide as to which direction you want to go. And know that there always is an unconditional source of well-being within. And it's not just within, it's everywhere.
Yeah, sounds very good.
That's it. I mean, I'd say if I could give a piece of advice to someone that's younger, that's listening to this, or hasn't quite realized these things, or is making it too complicated as I have, try that on.
Yeah, it's a good piece of advice, because so often we get caught up in our thoughts and we don't pay attention to the feelings. So this is really a way to sort of come to, in a sense, I was going to say mastery of it, or an understanding of it, so that you can have a better quality life.
And we're conditioned in many cases to not respect or listen to our feelings, or certainly to express, especially for men, toughen up, buck up, be a man, don't cry, and all that kind of stuff has its, purposes, like to harden you up to be a warrior in the world or something, but it can deprive you of the ability to navigate through this morass.
Yeah.
In a wise way. So, or like for women, it might be more that to not feel angry. You shouldn't feel angry. You should be a good girl.
You're supposed to be loving.
So you may not notice that you're not being loving. Yeah.
Or you can decide, you can not notice and then pretend like you're loving.
Yes. I love you. Yeah. Yeah. And so then you become fake and inauthentic, and that doesn't feel good. That's all.
All right. Very good.
Folks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Also humor. Humor's
good.
Yeah. Humor's good. You've taught me that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for watching. And if you like this kind of content, these deep conversations, open door, open mind, open heart looks at people's lives and what's going on in the world today from a spiritual point of view, then please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.